Well, folks, it's a pleasure to be here today. What I'm going to talk about is something that's, my charge or the reason I'm employed is to help promote colony health. And the #1 enemy to colony health is the Varroa mite in the state of New Jersey and probably worldwide, okay? And what I want to talk to you guys about today is I've been doing a lot of studies with some commercial beekeepers as to, they came to me this past spring and wanted to know what is the best thing they can use to control Varroa mites in their colonies. I'm going to tell you right now, controlling once a year, not enough, okay? Minimum twice a year, and we have some different products that work, and I'd like to refer to them as tools, and just like you use a hammer to drive a nail into the wall, you don't use a screwdriver to do it, okay? These tools have different uses and different functions, and I want to talk a little bit about them today, and some of the results that I found through counting numerous sticky boards and mite drops over a period of time. I will tell you I have an apiary that I maintain at Rutgers University that I teach the Beyond the Basic Bee course with. And there's about 12 colonies there. All but one came through the winter beautifully. They all made a crop of honey. We started a study back in the beginning of June with them counting natural mite drop. And we were getting mite drops anywhere from 100 mites in 48 hours up to 500 mites in 48 hours, dropping off without any treatment put on them, okay? That's very scary to me. That's a tremendous load of Varroa mites. Now, these colonies, like I told you, one died over the winter. They were treated last July with Mite Away Quick Strips. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, this is a Mite Away Quick Strip. It's a formic acid. There's 2 pads in this package. They're put in the brood nest, and it's a 7-day treatment, and it will knock down a lot of mites. If you read the literature, it talks about the fact that they claim that it sterilizes the male mite so that when the male mates with his sisters in the cells before they come out, that the mating doesn't work. So there'll be female mites come out of a cell, but they will not be able to reproduce. But they can still bite, and they can still vector virus. When I checked those same colonies after one treatment of Mite Away Quick Strips, I checked them the first week in September, and doing an alcohol wash, which I'll demonstrate, a little later today, I was washing anywhere from 1 to 2 mites per 100 bees. 1 to 2 per 100 bees, which I thought was a good number in the fall, or in the early fall. I felt pretty good about that. The same colonies at home that I treated with this, the second week in September was washing 8 and 9 mites per 100 bees, which is not a good number at all. So they got treated again. So the Rutgers colonies come through the winter. Keep in mind, they're not moved. The rest of my outfit is moved. Moving bees puts a lot of stress on them. So they're not moved, and they're sitting in a location that's really got good honey flows most of the season. They're very heavy going into winter with no supplemental feeding at Rutgers. This spring, when I'm teaching my class, we're out there and we'd see some Varroa mites in the drone brood, but I didn't think too much about it. Generally speaking, in the spring, it seems as though the queen stays ahead of the Varroa mites. Once the honey flows over, that's when the Varroa really gets an upper hand, and my thought was to treat them then. Until I started counting these high mite drops. After 2 days, we'd clean the boards, we'd count them again. Same thing. In the beginning of June, we were alcohol washing anywhere from 5 mites per 100 bees to 14 mites per 100 bees. 14 is way too high. 5 is way too high. So I started getting nervous about it. So I have a young man working with me this summer named Alex Warcola, who's a Rutgers student who's doing some bee inspection. And he's been counting a lot of mites. We went ahead and we did every other hive. We treated with Mite Away Quick Strips. And they dropped a tremendous amount of Varroa mites out of them. The ones that were not treated continued to drop some, but not a large amount like the Mite Away Quick Strip.
That was in June?
Beginning of June. After 10 days, I was really starting to get nervous, and these bees looked great from the front. The fronts were all bearded up, bees were flying hard, they made honey, but when you looked at the brood, we on the 12th and 13th of June, we had the Beyond the Basics class, and I was starting to see parasitic mite syndrome, which is where it's caused by viruses that are circulating, they're spread by the Varroa mites, and you will see larvae and pupa start to melt down in the bottom of the cells, but they don't really change color. Typically, those of you folks that are familiar with American foul brood affects capped cells, tends to have a perforation in the cell and a very sticky coffee-colored liquid in the bottom of the cell. Didn't look like that. European foul brood affects open cells or larvae. And typically, those brood larvae that have European foul brood, they will actually twist up the side of the cell and turn a yellowish color. When you smell them, it smells like rotten fish to me. Okay? Wasn't really seeing that. Was seeing larvae or pre-pupa that would flatten out in the bottom of the cell. They would not glisten anymore. They would kind of melt down, and you'd see where there was a black spot where their head would be, and in some instances you see a dead Varroa mite in there, in the back. So very weird looking. I also would see young bees that were trying to eat their way out of the cell. They were dead in the cell with their tongue hanging out and their head sticking out the end of the cell. Okay, and this is the Varroa virus complex. As the Varroa mite population increases, viruses start getting vectored around in the colony, and the viruses, when they get to certain levels, can damage the larva and the pupa, cause them to die or cause them to be severely weakened. So I was getting very nervous because I was seeing way too much of that. So after about 10 days of counting mites in the first treatment, we went back and treated all the control hives with this. And I want to tell you, some of these, in about 15 days total, we had some counts. 6,000 Varroa mites came out of a hive. 5,000 Varroa mites came out of a hive. I mean, these populations were incredibly huge. These colonies would not have even made it into the winter, yet they produced a honey crop. Okay? Now, if we hadn't looked for that, we wouldn't have found nothing.
How old were those hives?
Well, they came through the winter.
Oh, okay. So
It has nothing to do with the age. They were treated last summer. They came through the winter. Who produces the most honey? Overwintered colonies. Okay? Who tends to be the strongest colony? Overwintered colonies. And for those of you that don't know the life cycle of a Varroa mite female enters a cell a day or so before it's capped. She hides underneath the larva. Once the cell is capped, she bites a hole in the larva and starts feeding and then laying eggs. And if a Varroa mite goes into worker brood, she can have about 2 females that are viable once that brood emerges 12 days later. If she goes into a drone brood, she'll probably get 3, roughly 3. So I want you to think about it. If there's 1,000 Varroa mites in a hive today, 12 days from now, how many Varroa mites do you think are going to be there?
2,200.
Well, yeah, 22 to 3,000, somewhere in there if it's mostly worker brood. And then 12 days later, what's the number going to be?
6.
Yeah. And then 12 days later, and you see how this, over the course of the season, the number grows exponentially, okay? Which is one of the main reasons it's so vitally important to keep these things in check. Now, I will tell you that there's an organization. Has anyone heard of the Bee Informed Partnership, BIP? Okay, Bee Informed Partnership is out of the University of Maryland, and they do a lot of testing and a lot of national surveys on honeybee health. And they have been reporting each year that the average level of Varroa mites in colonies of honeybees that they sample and survey are increasing each year. Okay, why are they increasing? Is it because beekeepers, there's a whole group that don't treat at all? Or is it because doing it the same way you've always done it isn't adequate enough now? And I tend to suspect that that's the case. Once a year in July is not enough because the levels continue to creep up. So I will tell you a little bit about the history of control. Years ago when Varroa mites first came out, this was what everybody used, called Apistan. It was a strip that was put in the colony once the honey supers were removed. This had a 98% efficacy rate. That means it killed 98% of the Varroa mites in the colonies. Over time, from misuse and continual use, the mites became resistant to this product. It was not effective. Then another product came out that beekeepers used, but it had issues where it would be absorbed into the comb and the wax and cause reproductive problems with the queen and the drones. Okay. After that, formic acid, not as a quick strip, but as a pad, came out, and that was a 40-day treatment roughly. The honey supers had to be off for that treatment of formic acid, and typically the only time you could really put it on was the latter part of September, which is kind of late. Okay. So then Apiguard came out. Apiguard, this is Thymol Oil of thyme plant. Very, very, it vaporizes. It has a slow release formulation, and this has been pretty effective, and we've been using it for a lot of years. One treatment a year, the end of summer. It's labeled for use up to 100 degrees or so out, whereas the formic acid is only about 80 degrees. So that's been, but both of these products and another one called Apolife Var, they are not as effective. They're not 98% effective. They're maybe in the 80% effective range. So you see, if you keep treating and you're only killing 80% every year you're getting a larger population. Okay? So last summer, a treatment called Apivar came out. It's a plastic strip. And it is, the active ingredient is called Tactic. And it's a contact pesticide, much like the old Apistan. So I was a little skeptical. I tend to be skeptical about new things. I like to stick with what I know and what I've had success with in the past. But as a result of a request from a bunch of commercial beekeepers, they wanted to know what would work in their operation and what would be the best with the way they run bees. So I started really trying to take a hard look at it. Last summer, or last fall, I should say, maybe September, I had a bunch of beekeepers in Cape May County use this. And then I saw colonies that they had collapsing the end of September. So I was skeptical about it. I used it myself last year in all of my nucleuses that I made up later in the season, like in June. Because a nucleus made up in June, you really can't use either of these products because they'll overpower it. They vaporize too quickly and they'll overpower the bees and can very severely damage them. So I used to just not treat little nucleuses that were made up the end of June and hope they made it through the winter. Last year I used Apivar, and out of about 18 of them, I think all but 2 of them made it through the winter fine. Okay? So I felt kind of good about that. But when I looked at what was happening in Cape May County in September, I was nervous because I saw colonies collapsing loaded with Varroa mites that had these strips put in. And I'll tell you, now I've come to learn that if you put these in too late, there's a cutoff point where it's too late to do anything. Okay? If you don't get certain things done, like if you don't make hay when the sun's shining, if you wait till it rains to make it, you're wasting your time. You might as well not be in the hay business. And if you don't control Varroa mites at the right time of year, before their levels get too high, you might as well not be in it because you're not going to be successful. Okay? So this year, with these commercial guys, I set them up on bottom boards that I could easily check screens. We tested Apistan, Apivar, Apiguard, and Mite Away quick strips. Okay, one pad because it was quite warm when I did it, so it was like a half a dose. And I will tell you that the way it broke out in both of the commercial beekeepers that I've already done is Apivar dropped the most mites. When we did this out of each apiary had about 24 colonies in it, so we replicated it 5 times and multiplied it out and divided it out so we would know how many were dropping roughly per day. Apivar, Mite Away quick strips dropped a tremendous amount, and actually Apistan and Apiguard were at the bottom of the 4, and they were very close. Okay, so I thought that was very, very interesting. These guys, as soon as their honey's off, they're all treating with Apivar, these commercial beekeepers. Some of these colonies were alcohol washing anywhere from no mites to 10, 15 mites per 100 bees.
That's good.
Now, this was before treatment. Now, when I talk about an alcohol wash is similar to a sugar roll, except it kills the bees, and it works good even in high humidity times. Sugar does not work good in high humidity times. The sugar roll technique, is everybody familiar with that? Okay, a powdered sugar roll does not work well if the sugar does not stay on the bees for 6-7 minutes. The bees and the sugar got to be mixed together for a period of time, or it's not going to loosen any mites. If you put 2 tablespoons of sugar in 300 bees and invert the jar, there's not going to be any mites fall out, and you're going to think, I'm not going to treat because I don't have any mites. But when in fact you didn't do the test right, so you got plenty of mites, you just don't know it. Okay? Now, when we sample bees, I want you to keep in mind, we're looking at, well,
100.
in order to compare one hive to the next, our sampling protocol has to be the same. Okay? Can anybody tell me where are you most likely to find Varroa mites in a beehive? Does anybody know? Drone brood, or how about just brood? Okay. Varroa mites don't hang out in the beard on the front of the hive, and they don't hang out under the inner cover. Okay, they don't hang out in the honey supers. Okay, so if you're not taking a sample from the right place, then your chances of finding them are right down the drain. So the best place to look, Varroa mites want to reproduce themselves. They want to make more of them. And the place they do that is open brood. They want to get into open cells just before they're capped. Okay? So if we want to look for them and have a great chance of finding them, that's where we want to look. And the standard that most people follow that do this regularly is they want to look at 300 bees. Okay? Does anybody know what measure would be 300 bees? A half a cup. Okay? So we want a half a cup of bees off of open brood. Who else likes to hang out on open brood?
Queen.
And we do not want the queen to go in this jar because she's dead as a doornail if she does. We don't want to kill the queen. Okay? Now, we're going to look at 300 bees. We're going to count how many mites come out, and we're going to divide by 3. That's going to allow us to compare as best as we can apples to apples. Okay? Because we're looking at the same number of bees. If I wash 1,000 bees and you wash 100 bees, we can't compare what we find together. You see what I'm saying? So if you're going to do this, I recommend you use a half a cup of bees. I recommend you take it always from open brood, or mostly open brood. Okay?
Does smoking them before you sample them have anything to do with?
Has nothing to do with it. It's important to smoke them. Here is a mayonnaise jar with a lid for doing a powdered sugar roll. Same deal. You put 300 bees from open brood. Well, how do you get the bees off the comb into the jar? 300. This is how we used to do it. We used to take the lid off, tip the frame over, and go up the comb. Well, how do you know if you have 300, number one? And number two, you mash half of them and then they start stinging you because they're really ticked off. All right? Incidentally, this is sticky because it's got high humidity, and it's more humidity today right now. And it won't work that good if it's sticky. So here's a great way to do it. And this is not my idea. It's copied. I have almost no original ideas. All my ideas are stolen from somebody else, okay?
The internet's a great thing.
But look at this. And incidentally, Kev, I got to tell you, the whole old cooler wax melter thing, I must have told 1,000 people that one and demonstrated. I love that.
And I got that from the internet.
There you go, right back to what Karen said. I just think I'm making money out of nowhere when I melt wax with solar power. I'm so excited about that. But you get yourself a wash tub like this, and we're going to demonstrate this in the bee yard. You get your frame, you make sure your queen is not on it. And all you do is you go, boop. You just turn that frame up so the long ways is this way, and you just go, just like that.
So you don't need a brush.
And there'll be a ton of bees fall into here. And you want to pick this baby up, they're all crawling around, and you just go, they all go right into the corner, and you can take your half cup measure out, dump it into your container, dump the rest of them right back in the hive, and you did it so quick and slick, it's not even funny, okay? But you need some sort of a wash tub like this, okay? So now we're sampling the same number of bees from the same place each time. So we actually have something that we can compare to, okay? So if you're going to do the powdered sugar, that sugar's got to be put in here. It's got to be rotated around. It's got to be allowed to sit for, like I said, 6 or 7 minutes. So the sugar heats up and dislodges the mites. Today is not that bad a day humidity-wise, but if you wait till Monday, it's going to be like 95% humid. It's not going to work because the sugar is going to stick to the bees. It's not going to loosen mites, and you're going to get an incorrect reading, which is why I don't like it, okay? If I go to your house and look at your bees, I can't wait around 6 minutes, you know, and all. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to look at every one, but you follow what I'm saying. This, 300 bees, and this was Randy Oliver's design, commercially made, because my one that I made, like Randy said, leaked like a sieve, and I had alcohol running down my arm all the time. And then you shake this for about 30 seconds. Invert it, the bees stay up here, the mites float down to the bottom, and you can count them and divide by 3 in about a minute. Takes you about a minute to do the whole thing. It's all done.
Is that denatured alcohol?
You can use any kind of alcohol, and you can even use windshield washer fluid. Okay, like the kind you put in your car in the winter so it don't freeze. This is ethanol or some kind of alcohol that I get from the lab, but you can use isopropyl alcohol from the drugstore if you want. Okay, so
You're doing that in June.
you're doing this whenever you need to check to see what your mite level is.
Would you not do that unless you were going to treat, right?
I believe everybody should treat. I would much rather see you do it after you treat 2 or 3 weeks to see what your levels are.
Okay.
Now, is it a bad idea to check it before and check it after? It's not. But if you're only going to do it once, do it after you treated so you know what you're dealing with. Because what I've seen is everybody assumes their treatment worked. No one checks to see if their treatment worked. And assumptions do one thing. They make a you-know-what out of you and me. Okay? So I made this mistake a couple years ago. Did my same old thing that I did every year. Assumed it worked. A much larger number died than should have, as far as I'm concerned. I was way over 10–15%. And I thought, it must be pesticides. Because pesticides are a great thing to blame. Okay? But, and of course, then I was dead set against it. Okay? But as I started looking at these dead outs, there's Varroa mites all over the bottom boards. Tiny little cluster of dead bees. Honey still in the hives. It wasn't pesticides, it was Varroa mites. My Varroa treatment was not good. I never checked to see if it was good. And it was all on me. So I've not made that mistake ever since. Because I check afterwards. It's more important than checking before. Okay? Yeah, Stan.
Not to put you on the spot, Tim, but I have a lot of people call me up and ask me, what is the threshold? Not that I want to put you on the spot.
Great question. That's the same question I've been asking every name brand speaker that comes to New Jersey. And they all got a different opinion.
Exactly.
Okay? Now, recently we had some bee issues right after blueberry pollination in commercial apiaries. We've had some bad issues, not really sure what it is, but as part of this investigation, the Bee Informed Partnership has these emergency kits that they'll send out to beekeepers who think they may have pesticide, viruses, Varroa, but they don't send them out for free. I mean, to do all this testing costs about $1,000 per group. And one of my beekeepers did non-affected colonies, affected colonies, and dead colonies. So spent $3,000 examining pollen, examining Varroa levels, examining viral levels, okay? And one of the reports came back with his Varroa, and Bee Informed Partnership said, if you find 2 Varroa per 100 bees, you need to treat ASAP. If you find 5 Varroa per 100 bees, your colonies are on the verge of collapse. First time I've seen that in writing, just saw it less than a month ago. okay? So this is bleeding edge information. Randy Oliver has said if he has 2, he kind of feels okay with that, but if it goes over 2 out in California, he wants to treat. So I'm not positive. I do know from what I've looked at with these colonies at Rutgers is if you find 2 per 100 bees, you've got thousands of mites in the colonies. It reminds me of a cockroach. I'm a little bit of a cockroach freak, okay? You know, Jake used to take us to this workshop in Beltsville, Maryland, and they always kept the lights on at night in the hotel room. And I'm like, why do you have the lights on? Because the place is a roach coach. I thought they were kidding me. Literally, I shook my clothes out of my bag when I got home, and there's roaches running all over the ground. I'm smashing them outside, right? Roaches make me nervous. If you see one in your house, you got thousands of them. If you see a rat in your barn, you got hundreds of them. And if you find a Varroa mite in one of these tests, you got a lot of them. Got thousands of them probably. Okay? Because we're looking at 300 out of how many bees in a good strong colony?
10,000?
No, 50 to 60,000. Okay? So we're not looking at a lot of bees. The other thing I find is this alcohol wash, we've done a tremendous amount of them this year. They don't really correlate well to what the drop is that we get coming out of the colonies. Some colonies, I'd get 2 mites per 100, drop out, 5,000 Varroa through different treatments. Other ones, we had 14 per 100, and we dropped out, 2,000 Varroa mites. It doesn't quite make sense to me. Now, I haven't had a lot of time to really look at it multiple ways, but I'm just reporting you kind of preliminary information. I'm saying if you're fine, and actually I've talked to some of my commercial beekeepers in New Jersey, and really, if we're not finding zeros regularly, then I'm not comfortable. I think these ought to be zeros, a 1 every once in a while, maybe a 2 one time. But if you start seeing colonies and you're running 1s and 2s and 3s every time you do these, you got a higher level than you think, and you really need to knock it down. Yes?
Is there a difference between carniolans and Italians?
I don't know. I've only really looked at what the commercial industry uses, and they tend to not use carniolans because carniolans don't have large populations. They don't make as good a crop as an Italian would, and most of these guys do pollination, so they want bees flying in and out of the boxes. Can carniolans live with a higher level of Varroa mites in their colonies? Maybe they can. The reports are that they can. But most of the people that report it are people that are selling carniolans. So, I mean, you guys got to use your head when you're talking to people about stuff. You got to think and you got to ask the right questions. The car dealer is going to tell you his car is better than everybody else's. Okay? So, I don't know. That I don't know, yes.
So you're treating in June, when would you first treat in a given year? June, you're saying that you do that first treatment?
Or spring?
I think you should treat early in spring, and I'm going to tell you,
So that's like May?
what you should do, I'm not positive yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. As soon as my honey supers come off, this is going on. Because I think my levels are way too high across the board in all my bees. And these other things are not going to get it down as low as quickly as they should. So for this year, this first year, I'm using this as soon as the honey comes off. Now, I will tell you, Medhat Nasser, who is from Canada, he says they use this strip in Canada in February. And they put one strip in the winter cluster because they want to have the mite load extremely low when the honey supers go on so that they're not really have to worry about anything till the fall. And then they tend to vaporize oxalic acid. That's what they tend to do up there. But I'm just telling you, I like the idea of using one of these strips, not 4. But if I'm running double deep brood chambers, I'm going to have to use 4 this first year to get my levels down.
That would be overwintered bees though, right? You say the ones that came out of the winter, you put that on.
That's what they do in Canada. That's what I said. Yeah. Yes, sir.
No, you said that you put those on as soon as your honey supers come off, but you also mentioned a couple of times, there's a critical cutoff period where you should be treating in the summer. Otherwise, you use the hay example. You might as well. If you're too late, you can forget about it.
Yeah.
What time is that? Is that around mid-August?
No, it's around 4th of July.
But then does that affect your honey?
You need to get your honey off.
But
before you treat.
Okay, so that means you're done with, okay, but you have to get your honey off by the 4th?
Surplus honey for human consumption, most of it is done by 4th of July.
Because you need to put it in my fair at the end of July.
But the Mite Away you could put on with the honey on there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's the deal. So, you know, you may be like me. My life gets in the way of beekeeping all the time.
Right.
Job, family, et cetera, et cetera. So this will knock mites down while honey, and this is labeled for use when honey supers are on.
Yeah.
The problem is you start getting temperatures like we're going to have today. This is hard on bees. So you got to keep that in mind. But that is understanding your tool. Those of you that were here in the very beginning, I said you don't drive a nail into the wall with a screwdriver. You use a hammer. You understand the hammer's use, etc. The use for this works great to knock down mites that are on the outside of a bee's body. But if it's too hot out, it causes brood death, and it can damage, it can set the colony back.
Well, if you have several supers stacked up and you have a lot of room in the hive, does that give you a little more leeway using them?
This needs to be in the brood nest, not on top of the supers.
Right.
And, you know, it's just as warm in the brood nest. You know, I don't think it gives you a lot of leeway. I'd rather see you wait till the end of the day when we're going to have 2 or 3 days of overcast, rainy weather if you're going to do that.
And that's Apigard?
No, this is Mite Away Quick Strips. Okay? Yes?
I have 2 new hives, so, and we're not planning on getting honey off of them. Does it matter which then use the apron?
So here's what I did this year. I get queens every week, right throughout May, make up nucleus or true splits, splitting the boxes in half. Every one of them got that had 5 frames of bees in it, got an Apivar strip. Because I want them, just like a little baby, you nurture a little child along, they don't feed themselves that well. You need to nurture young bees along. And if you put one of these treatments on a 5 framer, you got big problems. It's too much for them. Okay?
Tim, what I tell my people when to Mite Away is look at the Weather Channel and watch your 7-day forecast.
Yeah.
And that's going to tell you in your area when to put the pads on, either 1 or 2. Those first 1 or 2 days is when it's going to really evaporate.
That's right.
They're the critical ones. You want a low temperature, like rainy days, as you said.
And by day 4, there's pretty much all this is out of it anyway. So if you really see what your temperature is for those first couple days, this you can use this effectively. Okay? But if it gets too hot, and you will see some damage. Yeah.
Either one of those products, you put either a strip or pad on top of each brood box, is that how it works? And slide?
No, this is applied. There's 2 pads in here.
Yeah,
This is enough for 1 hive.
You open them up.
you put one on top of, so you have 2 deep supers.
2 deep supers. You break the 2 deeps apart,
Yeah.
and this goes between them, perpendicular to the frames.
Okay,
And then you put the second deep back on top.
and put another one on top.
No spacer.
No, just put your honey supers or whatever else is back on top.
Both pads are between the brood boxes.
How about the other one?
Two.
The Apiarist?
Apivar hangs between the frames, and you'll see we're going to demonstrate how to put it on out in this apiary today.
Thank you.
Okay? And as Kevin just said, this is a contact pesticide. The honeybee walks across it. It's not dependent upon temperature, whether you have screen bottom boards or not, doesn't matter with this product.
Can you also mix it, the one hive I put terramycin on?
Yeah.
I had it from a European foul brood.
Yep.
So that's not, I could have both go on.
Yes, you can. These products form a vapor that's heavier than air. And I had a lot of people this year call me up and said, Tim, it's like they throw down the gauntlet. I did exactly what you said. I treated for mites and all my bees died. But what do you say to that? Well, there's a million reasons your bees could die. Okay? So I started asking them some questions. Well, do you run screen bottom boards? Oh yeah. Did you close them? No. I said, well, the label says you're supposed to close them because it's heavier than air and it falls right out the bottom, and you treated, but you really didn't treat.
That's for all of them, you need to put your bottom boards back in?
No, for these 2.
Just for those two?
For Apiguard and Mite Away Quick Strips and Apilife VAR, which is another product. I didn't bring a copy of that. But for this strip, this Apivar, you can leave them open. Okay, so those are
With no
some
honey on.
some of the differences. Okay, this one you can put on when honey supers are on. None of the rest of them can be put on when honey supers are on. Only Mite Away Quick Strip, labeled for use with organic honey production. and will not contaminate the honey that you haven't harvested yet. So we can use that to our advantage if life gets in the way. We can't get our honey crop harvested for whatever reason, this is the product to use. Okay? But I would still follow it up.
Does that get residue in the comb, that contact one, like Kumafos or Fluval?
It's not like Kumafos, no, no. I don't believe it will stick in the comb, but you're not supposed to have honey supers on when it's done. It's not labeled for use like that. Okay?
Tim, you were saying earlier you sampled 100 bees, but the common convention is 300.
No, I sample 300 and divide by 100 so that I'm saying, okay, we have 1 mite per 100.
I misunderstood you.
That would have been, there would have been 3 mites in here with 300 bees.
That's one.
So we do the math, 3 into you know, 1 into 3 goes, or 3 into 1, well, whatever it is, Kevin. It'd be 1 per 100, exactly right. And that way we can all compare things together. And you know, if someone's telling you how many mites you have, well,
How many,
yeah, is that 5 in 300 or is that 5 in 100?
did you only have 20 bees in?
There you go. There you go. I mean, I don't know about you, I've seen 4 or 5 mites on 1 bee before, walking across the frame.
Hey, poor thing.
Now, I get beekeepers tell me they don't have mites. They've never seen them.
Yeah.
But then when I show them to them, oh, I never saw them before. Okay? So, you know, I'm telling you, if you keep honeybees anywhere but Australia, you got Varroa mites to one level or
Did you
another.
get 'em yet?
No. And it's interesting because everybody wants to blame neonicotinoids all over the world for colony collapse disorder, okay? Very interesting, an article in Forbes magazine said the only thing different between Australia that doesn't have colony collapse disorder and the United States, which does, is Australia doesn't have Varroa mites, but they use more neonicotinoids than America does, and Canada does, which I think is interesting. So, you know, there's not conclusive, the word's not completely, we don't completely understand all of that yet. I can tell you right now, the greatest threat to your beehives is Varroa mites. It's not pesticides.
Here.
It's Varroa mites. Varroa. If you're not doing anything to control Varroa, then don't blame something else for killing your bees. That's my experience. People that do nothing in our overwinter death loss survey to control Varroa lose anywhere from 40 to 65% of their colonies over the winter. People that do something to control Varroa over a 6-year survey period lose anywhere from 10%, or actually some 0%, up to 29% was the highest. That was this past year. Okay? And in that data set were people that used these products and didn't use them correctly. I have no way to determine if they followed the directions and closed the screen bottom border or not. Okay? Oh, I thought somebody raised their hand. Stan.
Interesting point about the mites. I have never seen before, and we were at the Baton Rouge Bee Lab in January, ABS, and the scientists brought in for us a display there. They had a queen pinned down live, upside down, under the microscope, and my wife will attest to this. There was mites right at her abdomen, upside down.
So they'll go into a queen cell
Actually
and,
working,
yeah.
on a live queen.
yeah,
The mites were under her queen, underneath her abdomen.
She's helping them.
Wow.
You can see that, you've seen that.
Whoa.
yeah,
Unbelievable, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
yeah. Yes,
Does
ma'am.
the Beehives deal with tracheal mites? Is it, and are they a problem or an issue?
Tracheal mites, not a problem. We've looked at a lot of samples, had a lot of samples sent to Beltsville Bee Lab, and over the last 5 or 6 years, have not found any tracheal mites in bees coming out of New Jersey. That doesn't mean that they could not be there, but I've not seen them. Okay, and the lab has not detected them. So have the colonies developed resistance to tracheal mites? Maybe. Do these same products affect tracheal mites? Maybe. You know, I don't know that, Mim, but any of that could be true. Any of it could be true. Okay? I'll tell you, dead colonies don't make honey. Everybody know that? If you can't winter them, if you're buying bees every year because you never winter them, That's not really beekeeping. And I don't say this to offend anybody. Okay, a beekeeper keeps bees alive and then splits them up and sells them to somebody else, okay, as an income generator. Buying new bees every year is not the way to go. Not the way to go.
You're a beehiver then, if you.
Well, you know, the goal is to keep them alive, and the goal is to winter them over. Just as serious as I can be. There's so many people, you know, it's funny because there's a college I work with, not Rutgers, and they have an organization called SAVE, okay? And they want to save the honeybee, but they kill their bees every year. And I just think that's rather ironic. They get into beekeeping to save the bee and kill the bees every year. Okay? It's just very ironic to me. The people that are going to develop resistant bees are people that do breeding for a living. They're not Tim Schuler in his backyard in Richland, New Jersey. It's not going to happen. I can't control enough of the variables to do something like that. It's going to be people that do this on a large scale as they bring in you know, and select for different traits that make bees hopefully immune to them so we don't find them one of these days like we're not finding tracheal mites today. I can't wait for that to happen. How many of you kept bees before mites were in America? I mean,
Well,
that was...
I don't know about America, but.
Well, before 1989, how about then? Before they were in New Jersey. I mean, those were the heyday of beekeeping.
Yeah.
Beekeeping was very easy back then.
No bears?
No bears back then, no mites. Now bears. Every year I get more nervous because every year I listen to the Philadelphia news station. Bears are in Mount Laurel. Bears are in Waterford. Bears are in, you know, next thing is going to be bears are in Buna. And I'm in big trouble because I live there. And I don't have any bee yards that are bear protected. But it's coming. It's coming. It's not going to be long. Unless the state gives us a free rein to shoot them during deer season, and then, baby, we'll get them back in their place. So, any other questions? I will tell you something. A couple things that I've kind of pieces of a puzzle I've put together. Many times when colonies die over the winter, beekeepers will say, this was my strongest hive. This produced the most honey last year. Now I want you to think about it. Varroa mites need what to reproduce?
Growing the colony.
They need brood. The more brood that's produced, the more honey they produce, but the more Varroa that can produce. And if you don't adequately control Varroa in them strong colonies, they will not make it through the winter. Okay? I got one other thing to say. The other thing is European foul brood is a disease that affects open brood. Typically, we would only see it in southern New Jersey in the blueberry growing regions. Now I see it all over the state. I can't prove this to you guys, but I am very suspicious that the reason I see it is it's a stress-related disease.
Yeah.
And the reason we see it is because as the Varroa mites are increasing, that is one of the signs that that's going on. And it's very difficult to differentiate between European foul brood and the viruses that are vectored and amplified and transmitted by Varroa mites. The brood will often look very similar. Okay? So I just wanted to add that out as well. Charlie.
Okay, you said that you recommend a threshold of 1% now instead of 2%, 6 mites per 300 bees,
No, Bee Informed Partnership said if you have 2 mites per 100 bees, you need to treat.
2%.
If you have 5 mites per 100 bees, your colonies are on the verge of collapse. That's what the Bee Informed Partnership said in writing to one of my commercial beekeepers.
Okay, I caught the same message from them.
Yeah.
I started off with less than like half a mite per 300 bees.
Well, how about per 100 bees? So it was like, it was 0 to 0.1 per 100 bees, roughly.
Anyway, what happened was, that's very low.
Yeah.
That was in the spring, around April. And you realize, remember, I think I wrote you a note about what my level was, and I had one sick hive. I treated it right away.
Yeah.
3 weeks ago. And the difference.
How high did your level go from April till when you reported that?
Oh, 3%.
Okay.
4%.
Okay.
4 to 5%. Yeah. And you know what's the difference? And I raised bees this year. I mean bees. 3 boxfuls. And lots and lots and lots of honey. So that's to your point. You got to watch your growth. the growth curve of your bees and the mites that go with them.
Right. Somebody else had their hand up? Yes.
What's the approximate cost for the treatments?
I don't have it memorized. This is, if you have to put 4 strips in, it's probably the most expensive treatment, but it's the most effective as well. Okay? That's why I like the idea of treating a nuke, or of treating a colony, that, a winter cluster that only has 4 or 5 frames of bees, because it's only 1 strip then. Okay? But you got to keep in mind, you got labor associated with going back twice, whereas this is 1 treatment, lasts 40 days and you're done. This is every 14 days you got to go back and make another application until you do 2 applications. Okay? So, and the thing that I'll just reiterate when it comes to cost, dead colonies don't make honey, and most people have to buy new bees if they die. And if this, in comparison to a nucleus or a package, is very, very cheap. Okay? Any other questions or comments? When we go out to the bee yard after lunch, we're going to, we'll do some sugar and some alcohol washes so you can see how to do that. We have a colony that we're going to transfer into some other equipment. We're going to apply Apivar to a colony that is not making honey, and then we're going to look at the ones that have honey supers on, so we'll see, you'll be able to see what the honey flow is doing. And I'm going to be scanning the brood, looking for any signs of deformed wing or of parasitic mite syndrome. So hopefully I'll be able to show you that. Hopefully I won't be able to show you that, but as far as Dave's concerned, but hopefully I will be able to show you that as far as you're concerned. And as well as European foul brood, if there's any of those issues out there as well. So that's what we're going to do after lunch. Yes, Roger.
How effective do you think, I know it's not a cure, but pulling drone brood out of a hive and lowering mite count?
When are you pulling it?
Repeat the question.
Anytime you go in and find a frame of drone brood, just pull that frame out.
Okay, the question was, how effective do I think drone brood removal in controlling Varroa mites? And the reason I asked Roger when, because I had a guy call me up in New Jersey. All his bees died. What do you think the first question I asked him was? Did you treat last year? And you know what he said? Yeah, I culled drone brood. I said, okay. I went out and looked at his 8 dead colonies, and he had a Pureco green drone frame in every one of them, but there was not 1 cell drawn out on any of those Pureco drone frames. So in effect, in his mind, he thought he was culling drone comb, but effectively he didn't cull any drone comb, because there was no cells in drone comb to be culled. So if you're going to do it, you need to do it. If you're going to do it, you need to do it early. Okay, you need to start the beginning April. As soon as you start finding drone comb in there, start culling it, because this time of year, as the honey flow tapers off, they don't produce a lot of drone comb. And if you wait till now to start culling drones, it's too late in the season. It will never work. If you've done it from the beginning all the way through, it may help, but I would not, in my own operation, I would not rely on that alone at all. Yes?
I don't really rely on it, but I use quite a few foundational frames
Mm-hmm.
when I'm replacing a frame or something.
Mm-hmm.
And if I pull one out that's loaded with drone brood, I'll pull it out and put it on the white bird feeder. She loves to feed the bird.
Mm-hmm.
I do check some of them to see what a mite count might be in drone cells. Or some of them, if it's just a partial drone thing, I'll just take a knife and slice that section off and take it out.
The thing I can't tell you is how many drone cells you'd have to look at in order to get the same, in order to be able to compare it with an alcohol wash or a sugar shake. I don't have any idea how to correlate the two. Okay? So that's why I'm not real comfortable with that. Because if you look at 10 and only find 1, what does that mean, and how do I compare it to 300 bees examined? You see what I'm saying? I have no idea how to correlate that.